My name is Rigoberto Reyes.
Okay, and when did you first meet David Rico?
Thinking back, I met David Rico probably about 1975, mainly because I was active at Southwestern College as far as Mecha was concerned, and I didn't really like what the Mechistas were doing at Southwestern College. And my friend Arturo Herrera had just joined the Brown Berets of San Diego here, and basically he recruited me into the Brown Berets in 1975, and that's what I met David Rico, 1975.
And is that when you became a beret?
Yes, that's when I joined the Brown Berets, and interestingly enough, I came right after some issues that were happening internally with the Brown Berets. They had been infiltrated by the San Diego PD. So they were very careful, the Brown Berets were very careful, especially at that time, as far as filtering in new people coming in, which in retrospect, I don't really blame them. You know, at that time I was 18 years old, so I was somewhat green in a sense of being directly involved. But once I went through the filtration as far as the recruitment was concerned, is when I really got to know the Berets, and particularly David Rico, and under his leadership.
And what were some of the things that you learned in your time in the Berets?
I learned quite a bit, man. I learned quite a bit. When I joined, it was right at the peak, or more or less right at the beginning of the whole issue with the junkyards here. And that was one of the main emphasis that we were having, was basically trying to push the junkyards out of there. And it was getting hot. It was getting very hot as far as threats, and as far as even some bomb scares that were happening actually in this particular building. And we learned basically a lot of different strategies as far as security. And that helped a lot in a sense. And I'll be honest, I think I mentioned it on David's memorial that we have for him right after he passed away. And it's something that in retrospect, I don't really talk too much about it, but I know it was essential. It was very, very instrumental as far as community organizing is concerned, of some of the skills that I learned from David and I learned from the Brown Berets. Like I said, I don't talk too much about it, but the foundation of the car club that I belong to Amigos Car Club, the foundation as far as structure is concerned, I would definitely give that credit to the Brown Berets, and particularly David Rico, from the skills that we learned, that the founding members of Amigos were Berets, were Brown Berets. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're still around today, because the foundations and the basis that we learn are the same basic foundations of the Chicano movement, and it still carry us on today. I think for myself, being part of the Brown Berets helped me develop that structure. And in a sense, I was 20 years old when I wrote the bylaws for the Amigos Car Club, and we still live by those bylaws. So there's a lot to be said about that. And I think I want to stress this because within the car club culture, there's always issues as far as continuity. We have some old cliques, we have new cliques, we have a lot of new clubs that start, and then they break away, and then 5-10 years later they come back out again. There's some clubs that disappear for 25, 30, 35 years, and then all of a sudden they come back. And for us, I think one of the most important things is the consistency. We're never broken up. Of the 45 years, actually next week will be our 45th anniversary. Or the 45 years that we've been around, we're never broken up, and we've always been consistent in that sense. And I don't mean that in a critical way. I mean it more in a sense as far as again, skills that we learn from David Rico and the Brown Berets. I think he gave us a very solid foundation that will still continue today.
And I know you mentioned that you use that for your basis of the car club. And I know with VIA, we've had conversations about how you use that work across the border. Can you share with any of those experiences with the organizing across the border?
Most definitely, man. I mean, a lot of stuff that I learned here, and again, through the Berets, and not just the Berets, but the Berets was the foundation for it. But after that, I mean, we slowly got recruited into the Community Chicano Rights, so the CCR, and then later on to Unión del Barrio. And many of the skills that we learned, or at least that I learned, I was able to apply them across the border, working with marginal communities in Tijuana, Tecate, and Mexicali. My emphasis was mostly dealing with Tijuana, and particular communities that are barely starting up. And you got to understand the dynamics of a city such as Tijuana that's really a migrant city. Very few people that are actually in Tijuana even today are actually from Tijuana. Most of them have been migrating from different parts of the country. And they end up in Tijuana. A lot of it has to do, to some extent, some people wanting to come across the border, but that's not necessarily true for everybody. There's more opportunities in Tijuana than any other parts of the country as far as employment is concerned. The whole maquiladora issue in Tijuana kind of like attracts people from different parts of the country into the border. And when they migrate, then new communities start up, new colonias start up, and most of the colonias that start up across the border, they are what people would call paracaidistas. Paracaidistas are kind of like squatters. So most of the communities they start up as squatters until they get the attention from the government, and then one of the biggest issues that they have is trying to regulate those lands. And by regulation, it means to some extent legally trying to get access for a strong foundation and for you to have papers that basically saying that the land belongs to you. So there's negotiations that have to happen. Whoever really owns that land, whether it be the federal government, whether it be the state government, or a private person, then negotiations within the political leaders of different parties or whatever start with those folks. And essentially, once the land gets regulated, that's when you have the right to demand for services. Prior to that, unless you get regulated, the government's not going to look at you. They're not going to pay no attention to you. So these particular communities are the ones that we started organizing as far as getting to know each other in a sense, because the fact that you're Mexican or whatever, you come from different parts of the country. And you bring with yourself whatever, if your familia is from Sonora, from Guadalajara, from Jalisco, from Michoacan or whatever, you bring a lot of those customs and cultures with you. So Tijuana, to a great extent, becomes sort of like a melting pot or a salad, if you will, and everybody brings their culture with them. So to organize in these particular communities is challenging in a sense, but many of the principles that we learn as far as community organizing here, in particular here in Logan Heights, during the peak of the Chicano movement, well, I was able to transfer that into those particular communities, borrowing a lot of stuff that we have learned here, but also borrowing from other initiatives, particularly throughout Latin America, and Nicaragua, Cuba, and to some extent even Africa, as far as community organizing is concerned, and as far as also introducing concepts of promotoria. Promotoria meaning community outreach workers, if you will. I'm very critical of how that particular aspect of promotoria is being used here in the United States, because here in the United States it has been pretty much absorbed by the health world, if you will. Whether it be clinics, whether it be hospitals, whether it be whatever. You got promotores de salud, so on and so forth. The concept that we borrow from Latin America, particularly here at the border, as it pertains to Tijuana, Tecate, and Mexicali, it was more borrowed regardless of whatever the topic or the issue you're going to be confronting. And basically what it consists of is basically leadership skill building within those communities. And at the end of the day, who better to train people from within the community than the people that are actually living day in and day out in these communities. One thing that I was always very, very open with, and very, I think you have to be very, very open in a sense, but at the same time very realistic. And I was very upfront with the people that we work with in the different colonias, is that My reality is that I'm not from here. I'm not from those colonias. You are. My reality is over here. My reality is in the neighborhood. My reality is right here where I sit. This is my reality, and therefore I could have a better impact here than I can over there. But yet, by sharing the tools that we learn over the years, whether it be through the Brown Berets, whether it be through the Chicano movement, whether it be with the stuff that we were able to borrow from the different initiatives throughout Latin America, and combine all that and put it into the context of the border, and not only the border, but an urban setting, I think we've been very successful as far as that. And once again, you know, I think I was able to develop this methodology thanks to a lot of the skills that I learned here, you know, working in community.
And what would you say David's legacy is within the park and the Chicano movement?
Wow, that's a very good question. I think taking his history and what I know of him, I mean, one thing about David, he was a good storyteller. I am not. I'm not a good storyteller. That's why I don't talk too much about it. But I think his legacy is I mean, besides berets and not giving up, you know, again, I reflect a lot on David and the fact that his consistency with the Brown Berets, you know, since I met him and probably before I met him or whatever, he never let go of it. He was determined and he was definitely a soldado, you know, and probably more a soldado revolucionario, and I think that's probably in my mind, in my book, he's of the same category as Emiliano Zapata, if you will, in a sense of the true vision as far as the Chicano movement is concerned. He never lost track of that. And I think for that legacy to continue, I think it's very important. I think it's very important because it's the next generation, whoever that might be, has some big shoes to fill. Because I mean, David was, talk about commitment. That guy, that vato was a committed person. Having said that, I think as far as his legacy is concerned, I hope that the Berets, not just the Brown Berets, but all the other organizations that he was involved with at one time or another. He was also involved with the CCR. He was also involved with Union, and essentially, I mean, all that group of us that were kind of brought in around the same time, and actually were part of the Brown Berets of in the mid '70s. It's basically how we got to know each other. Like people like Jesse Constancio, you know, Ernesto Bustillos, Juan Parrino, amongst many other ones. Arturo Herrera, who's actually my compadre, and he was he's the one that recruited me into the Berets. These people, I mean, once again, committed, you know, committed gente, committed people, and I think that should be part of David's legacy in a sense, because I mean, we're still at it. You know, 45, almost 50 years later, and we're still at it. We're still here. You know, we have never left. So I think that going back to that consistency, and I think that reflects basically David's commitment.
And is there any specific memory you'd like to share about David?
Wow, I have quite a few of them, but some I'd rather not share. Because we did some crazy stuff. We did. I mean, at that time I was young, whatever, and you're willing to do anything, you know. And again, at that particular time, we had issues with the yunqueros, you know, and we used to go back and forth and did some crazy stuff. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.